Hello everyone, my name is Peter and this is my story. There were days when I went to sleep hungry. There were nights when I stared at the dark ceiling and quietly asked myself, will my life ever change? Sometimes life felt so heavy that I wanted to stop trying. But somewhere deep inside me, there was always a small voice that whispered, do not give up, keep going. I was born in a small town where life was never easy. My family was very poor. We lived in a small old house with cracked walls and a roof that leaked whenever it rained. We did not have beautiful furniture, expensive clothes, or many comforts. But as a child, I did not understand that we were poor. I thought our life was normal because it was the only life I knew. My father worked long hours every day, carrying heavy boxes in a local market. He woke up before sunrise and returned home late at night, exhausted and covered in dust. My mother cleaned houses for other families to earn a little extra money. Even though they worked so hard, there was never enough money. Sometimes we had very simple meals, and sometimes my parents quietly worried about how they would pay the bills. At night, when they thought I was sleeping, I often heard them talking in worried voices. Sometimes I heard my mother crying softly. I remember hearing my father say, I do not know how we will survive next month. Those words stayed in my heart. Even though I was young, I could feel the pain in our home. One winter was especially difficult. The cold felt endless and icy wind entered our house through small holes in the walls. My shoes were old and torn, and my jacket was too thin to keep me warm. At school, I saw other children wearing warm clothes while I tried to hide my broken shoes under the desk. Some children laughed at me. One boy pointed at my clothes and asked, why do you always wear the same thing? Another laughed and said, maybe his family is too poor to buy new clothes. I laughed a little to hide my sadness, but inside I felt deeply hurt. I felt ashamed, small and different from everyone else. That evening, I sat quietly beside my mother in the kitchen. She looked at me carefully and asked, what happened today? At first, I said nothing. But then tears filled my eyes. I finally asked the question I had been carrying in my heart for so long. Why are we poor? I asked softly. My mother stayed silent for a moment. Then she gently held my hand and smiled sadly. My son, she said, being poor is not the worst thing in life. The worst thing is losing hope. At that time, I did not fully understand her words. But years later, I realized she was right. We had very little money, but we still had hope. And sometimes hope is stronger than anything else. As I grew older, I wanted to help my family. After school, I started working at a small grocery store. I cleaned floors, carried heavy bags, and organized shelves. The work was difficult, especially after long school days. But every small amount of money mattered. While my friends played football outside or spent time together laughing, I stayed at work until evening. Sometimes I felt jealous. I wanted to enjoy life like them, but I knew my family needed me. One evening, after receiving my small payment, I handed the money to my mother. She looked surprised and shook her head. No, she said gently. You should keep this. But I pushed the money toward her and said quietly, we need food more than I need money. My mother suddenly began to cry. She hugged me tightly, and although she said nothing, I could feel how proud she was. Life continued this way for years. Every morning, I woke up early, went to school, worked after classes, and came home tired. Some nights, I felt angry at life. I wondered why things were so unfair, Why did some people have everything while others struggled just to survive? Sometimes I wanted to stop dreaming completely, but whenever I looked at my parents, I saw something important. Even when life was difficult, they never gave up. They were tired, worried, and exhausted, but they kept fighting. Watching them gave me strength. One day, I made a promise to myself. I decided that no matter how difficult life became, I would work hard to create a better future. I believed education could change my life. I believed learning could open doors that poverty had closed. But studying was not easy. Our house was noisy, and sometimes we had no electricity. Many nights I studied by candlelight while everyone else slept. I sat quietly on the floor with old books, tired eyes, and a heart full of determination. There were nights when I wanted to sleep instead of study, nights when my body felt too tired to continue. But every time I felt weak, I remembered my mother's words, "Do not lose hope." At school, one teacher changed my life. His name was Mr. James. He noticed how quiet I was and how hard I worked. One afternoon, after class, he stopped me. "You are a smart student," he said kindly, "but I can see pain in your eyes." I looked down and stayed silent. Then he said something I will never forget. "Do not let your difficult life stop you," he said. "One day your struggles will become your strength." Those words stayed with me for years. Whenever life became hard, I remembered them. Then life became even more difficult. My father became sick and could no longer work long hours. Money became tighter than ever. There were days when we worried about food, medicine, and rent at the same time. I seriously thought about leaving school to work full-time. One evening, I sat beside my father and said quietly, "Maybe I should stop school and work." He looked at me for a long moment and shook his head. "No," he said firmly, "you must continue." "But we need money," I replied. He looked tired, but his voice remained strong. "Yes," he said softly, "but I do not want you to live the same difficult life I lived." That night, I cried quietly in my room. I wanted to help my family so badly, but deep inside, I knew my father was right. So I worked even harder. I studied during the day, worked in the evenings, and stayed awake at night, reviewing lessons. Some nights I slept only a few hours. I felt exhausted, but I refused to quit. That one day, something happened that changed my life. My school announced a scholarship competition. The winner would receive financial help to attend university. At first, I thought, people like me never win things like this, but another voice inside me said, "Try anyway." So I gave everything I had. I studied harder than ever before. I stopped wasting time. I pushed myself even when I felt tired. Every day I repeated one sentence to myself, "Do not give up." Weeks later, the results finally came. I stood nervously among the students, my heart beating fast, my hands were shaking. Then the teacher smiled and said my name. For a moment I could not believe it. I had won. I felt frozen. My eyes filled with tears. After years of struggle, something good had finally happened. I ran home as fast as I could. When I entered the house, my mother looked worried. "What happened?" she asked. I smiled through tears. "I won," I said softly. "We did it." My mother cried. My father smiled proudly. That evening, for the first time in a long time, our house felt full of hope. University was still difficult. I still struggled financially. I worked small jobs, cleaned restaurants, delivered food, and carried heavy boxes. But something inside me had changed. I finally believed that life could improve. Years passed. Slowly, step by step, things became better. After many struggles, sleepless nights, and difficult years, I graduated. I will never forget seeing my parents on graduation day. They wore simple clothes, but their faces shined with pride. My father smiled at me with tears in his eyes. My mother could barely stop crying. For the first time, I felt like all the suffering had meant something. Eventually, I found a better job. Little by little, our lives improved. We moved into a better home. I bought medicine for my father and helped my mother stop working so hard. One day, I bought my father a brand new pair of shoes. He looked at them quietly and smiled. "You remembered," he said. Of course, I remembered. I remembered the cold winters, the hungry nights, the broken shoes, the pain, the sacrifices, and the dreams we almost lost. Life is still not perfect. I still face problems, but now, whenever life becomes difficult, I remind myself of one important truth. Hard times do not last forever. If you keep trying, keep learning, and refuse to quit, your life can change. Maybe not quickly, maybe not easily, but slowly, step by step, things can become better. If you are struggling today, please remember this. Your difficult chapter is not your whole story. You may feel weak right now. You may feel tired. You may feel hopeless. But never stop believing. Keep fighting. Keep learning. Keep moving forward. Because one day you may look back at your life, smile proudly and say, "I was poor, but I never gave up."